If tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I had to start again to live love instead of strife, thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away.
Were pioneers and participated in the Oklahoma Land Rush. His grandmother, Kansas America Carson Vasey, a niece of famed Indian scout Kit Carson, drove the buckboard while her husband rode ahead to drive the stake that identified their future homestead. They opened the country store, and soon after, Grandpa Vasey was elected the town sheriff. From his grandparents, Joe learned the values of hard work, honesty, justice, and respect for all individuals. Joe might have become a farmer in the Midwest, if not for his father's need to see the world. A Mustang officer, and that's a individual that goes from the ranks all the way through to earning a commission. Robert Vasey joined Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet on their goodwill tour of the world. He met his wife, started his family, and made the U.S. Navy his chosen career. Being part of a Navy family, Joe attended over a dozen schools. While in high school, Joe spent time in the Philippines, where he learned to speak some conversational Tagalog, which he still uses today to dazzle numerous nurses and a few waitresses. Joe decided to carry on his father's profession as a naval officer. After spending 2 years in the U.S. Naval Reserve as an apprentice seaman, he won an appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. He graduated from the Academy in 1939. This is called the Class of Stars. Soon after graduation, Joe served on the battleship USS Mississippi, where he spent many a day aloft in the open gunnery sighting position, high on the mast, calling the targets for the 12 massive 14-inch guns. No wonder he has trouble hearing. Shortly, following his cruise as an ensign, Joe was captivated by the call of the Submarine Corps. Following sub school, Joe was ordered to the R-20, a leaky old boat used for gunnery practice. Overall, Joe served on 3 different submarines during World War II: R-20, Gunno, and Angler. Most of the war was spent on the submarine USS Gunno, commanded by John McCain. Gunno's initial wartime operations were as an advanced scout for Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa in November of '42. The gunner proceeded ahead of the invasion force, close offshore, with an infrared beacon on the bridge to help guide the assault forces landing near Casablanca. Commencing at 0200 on the 8th of November. Soon, Gunno itself was in the middle of the crossfire of opposing forces after the bombardment commenced, with salvos from the battleship Massachusetts passing close overhead like freight trains in the night. Now, in the middle of a crossfire, Gunno was strafed by an American plane. Later, while heading to sea, another American plane thought the sub was a German U-boat and dropped a bomb that exploded uncomfortably close over the conning tower as the sub was diving. The sub was severely shaken but received no major damage. Joe said, other than bruised egos, he and a few others in the conning tower were nicked on the face by flying paint chips. Joe joked, relative to recent times, that they never even considered that this experience would result in a Purple Heart. Later, the gunner was ordered to Falmouth, England, and the sub-base at Roseney, Scotland, for critical repairs. Following the repairs, it returned to the U.S. and was ordered to the Pacific for command operations against Japanese forces. Friendly fire during this period was as much a worry as the enemy fire was. Joe said the gunwale, while he was aboard, had the unique distinction of being attacked by the military forces of 5 different nations, but only 2 were enemy forces. These attacks included being strafed by machine guns by an American fighter off Casablanca, and 2 hours later bombed, near miss, by another American plane. In the crossfire between American warships and French shore batteries. Almost being sunk by the British warships west of Gibraltar. Strafed again by a German plane off southern England. Straddled by bombs from an American bomber near Darwin, Australia. Attacked by Japanese forces in the Pacific on numerous occasions. Aerial bombs, depth charges, gunfire, and torpedoes. Fortunately, all these guys were poor shots. But Joe said his most memorable experience, one etched in his mind to this day, was a 36-hour skirmish in 1943 with 3 anti-submarine warships in the Yellow Sea. With the submarine severely jarred by depth charges, foul air, and the air becoming very difficult to breathe, the propellers barely turning due to depleted battery power, he thought to himself, this is a hell of a way to have to settle these international disputes. Praying for a successful outcome, he quietly vowed that after his naval career, he would devote his energies in this direction. Following prospective commanding officer, or PCO school, Joe was ordered to take command of a sub still under construction. With the war turning in favor of the Allies, Joe demanded to be sent back into action rather than sit out the next 9 months awaiting his command. With some help from friends in the Bureau of Personnel, he received orders to Fremantle, Australia, where luck would have it, the USS Angler found itself in need of an XO. Joe jumped at the opportunity for another shot at the Japanese enemy, so he signed on as an XO/PCO and sailed back into combat. Of course, his adventures on the USS Angler included more than sea time. Now here's a shot of a night out with the Angler's officer and crew in San Francisco back in '44. Clearly blowing off some steam. Oops. Who put that in there? My apologies, folks, for that seems to be a wardrobe malfunction. When the war ended, Joe found himself on Midway, in the #1 slot to take over command of a U.S. submarine. While he was keen to take command, the skippers of the submarine fleet made every effort to stay in their commands as peace broke out, much to the dismay of Joe and the other submarine officers waiting command. Joe was offered a trip straight back to the USA to be part of the first group ashore on mainland Japan. Think back now. The Emperor had only just surrendered on the 2nd of September, so Joe and his fellow submariners who landed at Yokosuka Naval Base, just south of Tokyo, only 2 nights before the formal surrender ceremonies aboard the USS Missouri, located in Tokyo Bay. They had no idea the reception they'd received. They were ordered to secure the Yokosuka base and demilitarize scores of suicide boats and mini-subs there, including the gigantic aircraft carrier sub, the I-400. Fortunately, no opposition was encountered, nary a soul in sight. The afternoon of the surrender, a cocktail party was held at the Oak Club to celebrate their hard-fought victory. A photo of this tense but happy occasion is in the Clean Sweep Bar of Lockwood Hall, right here in Hawaii. In the immediate post-war years, Joe was ordered back to work with the Bureau of Personnel under the command of John McCain. His massively complex and demanding job for 3 years was to construct the drawdown of the U.S. naval forces post-World War II. Joe's education includes 1951, Master of Education at Stanford University. 56-57, Joe completed studies at the U.S. Naval War College. Other post-war highlights include a White House naval aide in the Truman administration. Joe even briefly dated young Margaret Truman. His favorite story involved a jolly and mildly inebriated British Lord Louis Mountbatten, Prince Charles' polo instructor, who, while awaiting his grand entrance to the ball, Joe advised his lordship that his fly was undone, much to Mountbatten's amusement. Joe was also chairman of the study committee that developed the operational strategy for the inaugural fleet of ballistic missile firing submarines. His study was approved right up the line, including the recommendation for building 41 submarines. Joe held 5 commands at sea. This is a rarity for most career naval officers. These commands include a submarine division, fleet oil tanker, the USS Kawashi. Oh, who is that? It's Lillian helping Joe out. A heavy cruiser, the USS St. Paul. Flag officer in command, ROTC midshipman summer training cruise. Flotilla of destroyers and cruisers with his flagship, the battleship New Jersey. Chief of Staff to the commander, U.S. 7th Fleet, consisting of 125 ships when the Vietnam War started. Deputy Director, U.S. National Military Command Center in the Pentagon. Responsible for briefing national leaders via the hotline, including the President, on international crisis and threats to national security, as well as any indications of imminent nuclear attacks against the U.S. Sorry, no photos here. It's all top secret. Secretary of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. Chief of Strategic Plans and Policy for 3 years on the staff of Admiral Jack McCain. SINCPAC. Commander-in-Chief Pacific. Joe's World War II skipper on the submarine Gunnel. After retiring from the Navy in the early 70s, he lost no time in following up on the promise he made to himself in 1943 in the Old Sea near Nagasaki, Japan. With his Vietnam experience, he was now more convinced than ever of the need for a greater trans-Pacific policy dialogue between the U.S. and Asian nations. In 1975, he founded the nonprofit think tank Pacific Forum in Honolulu to give impetus to his idea. The Pacific Forum examines U.S.-Asian relations, focusing on policy divergences, especially those issues with the potential to go critical. Though it began as a small one-man effort in a humble downtown Honolulu office, which was provided by Joe's good friend, Spencer Murphy. The Pacific Forum grew to become a premier Asia-focused think tank, eventually merging with CSIS in Washington, D.C. back in 1989. This was a merger of equals, not since repeated. And the Pacific Forum maintained its identity and independence despite becoming part of a much larger CSIS establishment. Through consideration of the different national interests and perceptions of security, the Pacific Forum serves as a vehicle for a robust and stimulating challenge to the premises and conduct of foreign policy of the nations involved. Today, this kind of private exchange is known as Track 2 dialogue, complementing the efforts of regional governments and official organizations. For Joe Vasey, it was fulfillment of his personal commitment to a peaceful world. Pacific Forum's thinkers, movers, and shakers involve academic experts, corporate leaders, and senior government officials from all around Asia and the Pacific. For the first few years of its existence, Pacific Forum operated on a shoestring budget. The budget today is $1.2 million annually, and mostly from outside of Hawaii. Through the Pacific Forum, Joe initiated in the mid-'80s the first ever meeting of U.S. congressional leaders with Asian counterparts and a delegation from Europe. This was called the Pacific Parliamentary Caucus and was continued annually for 5 years in Hawaii. In 1995, Jim Kelly took over as the head of the Pacific Forum, CSIS. He succeeded Amos Jordan, who replaced Joe. When he decided to semi-retire in 1991, Joe credits these two, as well as the current leader, Ralph Koza, with building the Pacific Forum, CSIS, into what it is today, the most influential private sector policy research institute in the Asia-Pacific region. He is especially pleased that Jim Kelly was appointed by President Bush as the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, and that Torco Patterson, also of Honolulu, who spent 5 years at the Pacific Forum, was named as the Senior Director of Asian Affairs on the U.S. National Security Council staff in the White House. Not a bad track record for a small institute. In 1990, Joe was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Hawaii. This was the first senior military officer to be so honored. in recognition of his many contributions to increasing understanding among the nations of the Pacific Rim. In 1997, he received Hawaii Pacific University's highest honor, the Fellow of the Pacific Award. In 2001, the students of the College of International Studies at HPU, where Joe has been an advisory council member for the past few years, dedicated their yearbook in his honor. Joe continues to be active with the forum as a policy advisor and vice chairman of the board, and is in his office on Bishop Street at least once or twice a week. He is also busy with other community activities such as Rotary, PAAC, EWC, and HPU, and stays abreast of naval matters, especially through his interaction with submariners, both active and retired. The Pacific Forum, CSIS, surprised and honored both Joe and Lloyd at the August 2002 annual board meeting by establishing the Lloyd R., that's Joe, Vasey, and Lloyd R. Vasey Fellowship Program, and started an endowment fund to bring a continuing series of young Asian scholars to Hawaii. Joe recalls a story that Lloyd told him many years ago after attending a reception in Washington, D.C. 3 of the Navy's top leaders spotted Lloyd, called her over and said, "We've been watching you, and have decided you should be an admiral's wife." When Lloyd came back and told Joe, he gasped and said, "Those 3 sit on the review board." And as the saying goes, the rest is history. Joe credits the successes in both his careers to the dedication and support of his wife Lillian and his 3 daughters, Chris, Carla, and Kari, later joined by son-in-law Garrett and granddaughter Gracia. Here is Gracia at a 2002 rally to support the troops throughout Joe's naval and civilian careers. He has distinguished himself as a man that stands for honesty, freedom, and respect for all human beings. We salute Admiral Vasey for all that he has brought to the United States Navy and for his efforts to promote these values to a worldwide community.
We got another camera here, Fred. We got 2 more cameras here, Fred. He's a great photographer.
That's nice. Good frame.
Dinners for free.
I like the work that pays up out there.
Pictures. Come on, guys. Come on over here. We miss? Come on over here. Come on over. Why don't we come back again? Come on, please.
To honor you as an American. And I know when you put your hand over your heart and you pledge allegiance to one nation under God, you mean it. Because you know that what we have and the blessings of this country don't come from the institutions of man, but come from inalienable rights, come from a power higher than us. I know that you know the foundation of this country are not the edifices of government, but your family. Your beautiful wife there and your daughters, and the love they've given you all your life. And that's what makes America great. And I also know that what makes America great is the greatest generation that you were a member of, and Senator McCain's father. But I also know there were great generations to follow you. A man that was on the deck of an aircraft carrier in a jet in the Vietnam conflict, who put his life in harm's way to protect our freedoms, but also the freedoms of people of Southeast Asia, some of which are here tonight. Right now, as we speak, there are young men and women in uniform in faraway land getting ready to liberate a city, Fallujah. We're here to honor you for all your accomplishments in your life, but I feel the greatest accomplishment I can say that in all the years I've known you, is you represent all that is best in America. Thank you for being you. Thank you very much.
Political director.
Richard Kelly of Outrigger Hotels. And Patrick Brent. Without their extraordinary help, this evening would not have been possible. The Marine Corps and Air Force operations across more than 100 million square miles. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming the commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, Admiral Thomas Fargo.
Senator McCain, distinguished guests, all the flag and general officers that are here tonight, and of course, Joe and Lily and all of your family. You know, as long as I've known Joe, I've heard him tell stories about he and my father, Bill Fargo, beginning with their days at the Naval Academy with the great class of 1939. And I don't know how many of you out there have a copy of the Naval Academy yearbook, what we call the Lucky Bag from 1939, but I do. Many of you know that Joe got his moniker from calling everyone else Joe. So I guess that made his own name easier to remember, for one thing. But according to the Lucky Bag, Joe was also frequently referred to as cuddlesome as well. You know, I get asked a lot why I joined the Navy and why I stayed in the Navy over these 35 years. But I think it's the likes of men such as Joe that gave me my reasons for joining the Navy. Maybe it was their boundless energy, maybe it was this gratitude, but it always seemed to me that these men living in those times and the days that followed took more risks. It was part of what made them a member of what somebody's already said tonight, what made them part of the greatest generation.
It is a great privilege and an honor for me to be able to pay tribute to my boss, my mentor, and my friend, Joe Vasey. I want to just very quickly tell you a personal story that some of you probably know, but I think many of you don't. And that's to the origins of Pacific Forum, how Joe came to create this think tank that is dedicated to trying to promote better understanding and confidence and trust throughout the Asia-Pacific region. And it all goes back to World War II when Joe was serving in a submarine with Senator McCain's father. And they were in a particularly tight situation. They were running out of air. They were being prosecuted by Japanese destroyers, and they were going to be forced to come to the surface. And Joe, as he was thinking about, there weren't really a lot of good options as you're surfacing in this type of an environment, said, if I live through this, I've got to find a better way for people to sort of work out their grudges than shooting at one another. And as luck or providence or both would have it, they surfaced in a cloud bank. The Japanese destroyer was facing the other direction. They managed to escape to safety, to live and to fight and to serve another day. But he kept that pledge, and in 1974, he founded the Pacific Forum, just aimed at trying to create that dialogue and understanding. Joe, we're continuing to try to protect your legacy. Again, many of you may not know, but a few years ago, to commemorate Joe's 85th birthday, we created a Vasey Fellowship at the Pacific Forum. I might add that donations are welcome and they're tax deductible, but we have now every year brought a young Asian scholar in to come and study at the Pacific Forum in order to keep Joe's legacy alive. And I can promise you, as long as I have the honor of being at the helm at Pacific Forum, we'll continue to follow your dream, Joe, of finding a better way a way where people can talk to one another rather than shoot with one another. So let me join Admiral Fargo and the others in saluting Joe Vasey and Lillian and the whole family and thanking them for the great pleasure of being able to serve with him and for his great contributions to our nation.
I couldn't be more pleased to introduce my friend, a truly great American, a phrase that is sometimes overused, but in this case, a truly great American, my friend, Senator John McCain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you all. Thank you. Please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerry. That's much nicer than the introduction I received at the Scottsdale Rotary Club last week, where the guy said, "Here's the latest dope from Washington, Senator John McCain." Beside that lady, I was at the airport, this guy came and said, "Anybody tell you look a lot like Senator McCain?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Doesn't it make you mad as hell?" I said, "Yeah." I keep running into people like our wonderful Chris, Admiral Vasey's daughter, who supported me when I ran for president. I want to thank all of you. So many people say that I was supported that I should probably demand my own recount. But we do have a very serious problem in Arizona that I'd like to mention to you, and it's a real problem, and that is because Barry Goldwater from Arizona ran for President of the United States, and Morris Udall from Arizona ran for President of the United States. Bruce Babbitt from Arizona ran for President of the United States. I from Arizona ran for President of the United States. Arizona may be the only state in America where mothers don't tell their children that someday they can grow up and be President of the United States. And by the way, that rain I brought, we have so little water in Arizona, the trees chase the dogs, so I was very happy to see that rain there. I thank all of you for being here, and it's a great privilege to honor an American whom I and all the McCains have always had the greatest personal respect and affection. Tonight we recognize and celebrate Admiral Joe Vasey, my father's dear friend and comrade for so many years, for his lifetime of distinguished service to our country in war and peace. This salute to him represents not only our own appreciation of Admiral Vasey's service, but reflect the thanks of a grateful nation that he has well earned for embodying the very finest qualities of patriotism and his constant service to a cause greater than self-interest. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the details of Admiral Vasey's biography. From the Naval Academy to dangerous duty in the Second World War, to 5 commands at sea, to service in the highest councils of military command, his was a most distinguished and honorable Navy career. And he didn't believe his retirement from active duty relieved him of the responsibilities of patriotism, as he continued to serve the national interest by founding the Pacific Forum to promote stability in our security in the critically important Asia-Pacific region. These are well-known and much appreciated highlights of a very successful career and a good life that was and remains of inestimable value to America and indeed humanity. What elaboration of this illustrious life I can offer are the reminiscences of a friendship, some of which I was privileged to personally observe, and which for me served as emblematic of a tradition, that of service as an officer in the United States Navy, and the bonds of respect and love that unite good officers in shared sacrifice and devotion to their service and their country. It is a tradition upon which, in the most difficult moments of my life, I relied on for the strength to persevere for my country's honor and for my self-respect. Very late in his life, my father was interviewed for an oral history of our officers in the post-World War II Navy, who as junior officers had first distinguished themselves in the war. There's a term which has slipped somewhat into disuse, he remarked in the interview, which I always used till the moment I retired, and that is the term an officer and a gentleman. And those two imply everything that the highest sense of personal honor implies. Had my father been asked to identify a contemporary who personified the virtues he considered essential to the life of an officer and a gentleman, I have no doubt he would have thought first of his friend Joe Vasey. His respect and affection for you, sir, I hope you know, was unlimited. And like many of our most lasting friendships, yours was first forged in the crucible of war and strengthened to last a lifetime by your shared experiences aboard the very able fighting ship, the USS Gunnell, as it prowled the Pacific from Midway to Nagasaki in search of the enemy. They were proud veterans of an epic war, and they never felt the need to exaggerate their experiences. They did not bluster or brag or swap stories to impress each other. They talked about combat as they talked about other experiences in the service. They talked about the lessons of leadership they learned and how they could apply them to current situations. They talked about how the men they served with had performed in battle, who had been the most capable and steady, who had measured up to the terrible demands of war, and who had not. Their courage was exceptional, even in war. Their duty to country, exemplary. My father was proud of and loved those men dearly all the days of his life. He and his able, brave torpedo officer remained the closest of friends for the rest of his life. He and Admiral Vasey saw more combat together. They were together in other battles. They were together when, after seriously damaging the officers' club on Midway, he drove his Jeep into the lobby of the BOQ. And they would serve together again as they both rose in rank in the years after the war. They were together at important moments in both their lives. They were together when my father became Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Command during the Vietnam War, and Admiral Vasey was his most trusted advisor as head of strategic plans and policies. They were together when drafting messages to the Joint Chiefs, to the Secretaries of Defense and State, to the President's National Security Advisor, arguing for a strategy that intended to win the war rather than just continue the bleeding. They traveled together to Vietnam and throughout Asia. They were together when my father testified before a Senate committee, lost his temper, stood up, and began dressing down a young senator who had questioned his honesty, until Admiral Vasey discreetly pulled at his jacket to encourage him to back down. And they were together when my father gave orders for the B-52s to bomb the city in which his son was held a prisoner of war. They were the best of friends, and to me, as I said earlier, exemplified that noblest of traditions, brothers in arms, and I believe is one of the greatest sources of strength and honor that anyone could be fortunate enough to join. I have never found its equal in other walks of life. It was my father and grandfather and the men who served with, like Admiral Vasey, who first taught me the ways and means of honor. The Naval Academy and then the men I served with in war reinforced the lessons. They were my first teachers. And I count myself immeasurably fortunate to have had their example early in life, so that the courage and strength I would need to survive misfortune later in life, I could derive from their stories, their courage, and their honor. I wrote about it several years ago in a memoir of my and my father and grandfather's life in the Navy. I'd like to close tonight by reading from it because the sentiment it expresses concern Admiral Vasey directly. This is the truth of war, of honor and courage that my father and grandfather had passed on to me. But before my war, its meaning was obscure to me, hidden in the peculiar language of men who had gone to war and been changed forever by the experience. So too had the Academy tried to reveal its truths to me. But I had interpreted the lesson as I had interpreted my father's lessons within the limits of my vanity. I thought glory was the object of war, and all glory was self-glory. No more. For I have learned the truth. There are greater pursuits than self-seeking. Glory is not a conceit. It's not a decoration for valor. It's not a prize for being the most clever, the strongest, or the boldest. Glory belongs to the act of being constant to something greater than yourself, to a cause, to your principles, to the people on whom you rely and who rely on you in return. No misfortune, no injury, no humiliation can destroy it. This is the faith that my commanders affirmed, that my brothers in arms encouraged my allegiance to. It was the faith I had unknowingly embraced at the Naval Academy. It was my father's and grandfather's faith. A filthy, crippled, broken man, all I had left was the faith of my fathers. It was enough. And it has always been enough. That faith, that constancy to duty, I learned not just from my father, but from the men he shared it with. Men like the man we honor tonight. Were he still alive, my father would have wanted to speak in my place tonight to express his respect for the man whose friendship, counsel, and loyalty he esteemed beyond measure. He would have said, as I do now, that it's a rare honor to join you in saluting a great patriot, a good man, an officer and a gentleman, and a brave defender of the faith, Admiral Joe Vasey.
Thank you, Senator McCain, for those beautiful remarks.
Can we have Joe join us on the stage, please? It's a great honor and privilege for me to be up here as the president of the Honolulu Council of the Navy League and to present to you with this award in appreciation for all those many years that you have given to us and to all Americans. Thank you.
Please excuse my voice. The only upside to my voice, ladies like Linda tell me it sounds sexy. I'm truly honored to be here tonight. Have our good friend, Senator McCain, with us. Great honor, sir. And we've got to get behind you in this state to boost you 4 years for our next president. Thank all of you for coming out like this. Now, next time you hear me, my voice surgeon, expert from Duke University, gonna come out here. He's got a special operation. Gonna make me sound like I was as a midshipman. Thank you. Mahalo. Mahalo.
Gentlemen, would you escort? And I don't think there's anyone more proud in this audience than your beloved Lillian, who's gone through some pretty heavy medical things of her own and is out here for the first time in a long time in public. And we thank her so much for conquering all of her challenges as well. Congratulations, Joe, to the family. Mahalo to everyone who spent the evening with us, especially Senator McCain for coming all the way to make such an impact on this group, and of course the Vasey family. Thank you all for being here. As my husband Kirk always says, take care of each other, drive safely home, and have a wonderful tomorrow. Aloha.